Hello everyone, I'm Ed Densel and I host Unfound and I run this YouTube channel. I realize you don't want to give a thumbs up to the following video until you watch it. You know what? That's totally understandable. I can appreciate that. But what you can do right now is subscribe to this channel. The button is right there. Thanks. Hello everyone, I'm Ed Densel and I host Unfound, but you're now watching Unfound Now. This is a monthly program I started back in the summer of 2020 where I talk about recent disappearances, which means by recent I mean disappearances that happened within a few months of that Unfound Now episode coming out. As the title suggests, I'll be talking about the disappearance of Lindsey Schobelock, who disappeared from Chillicothe, Ohio on February 23rd, 2022. Like I said, this is a monthly program, and there are really three goals. I know before maybe I was talking about two goals of Unfound Now if you've watched previous episodes, but I'm going to make that list a little longer by going to three, and I think people who listen to the podcast know I love talking about ideas in sets of threes. I don't know why that is. But the three reasons that Unfound Now exists is number one, for publicity. Unfound is a popular podcast, a popular true crime podcast, a missing persons podcast, and likewise, this YouTube channel is also very popular. So, for publicity. Number two, this gives me a chance to explain to all of you how we go about looking at disappearances when we see them in the news, whether it's today, tomorrow, next week. What do we look at in news articles to really analyze that particular disappearance? What catches our eye? I've talked about that before on Unfound Now. That is a main goal of this program. And number three, it's also trying to teach you about disappearances using facts from these disappearances as examples. That's what Unfound Now exists for, and Unfound as a whole, not just here, but the regular podcast episodes, any other video you see on this channel, many of the other things that we do at Unfound, it's all geared toward education. This is not an entertainment venture for all of us. It is a news and educational venture. With every episode of Unfound Now, I like to bring up three learning points. And so those three learning points for Lindsey's disappearance are: number one, what the news doesn't say. We've talked about this before. We're going to talk about it again. Number two, we've been here before, and that will make more sense to you when I go in depth with each of these topics later in this video. And number three, mental health rules almost all. So now I'm going to go to the map. I'm going to show you where Lindsey was working that day, where she lived, where her car ended up. In addition, I will be going over the facts of that day, her movements, a sighting of her, a video sighting of her, among other topics. And then I'll come back and we'll get into these educational points a little bit deeper. Okay, let's look at the three major locations for the disappearance of Lindsey Schobelock. While you're taking a look at this map, I will just be reading off some items about Lindsey and her disappearance. You'll see right up here is where she was working at the time, the Iron Pen Tattoo Collective. I went online using peoplelooker.com. I have a subscription there, but I think even if you use it for free, that you could probably have gotten Lindsey's address. But the time of her disappearance, just a month ago, the most recent address for her is 425 Church Street, which is right there. And then eventually I'm going to be talking a little bit about this area down here at the bottom left of the screen. Let me push that up a little bit. And talking about where her car was eventually found. Lindsey was 28 years old. She was the mother of two, and she worked at this tattoo collective. I'm not sure how long she worked there. She just started there, had been working there several years. I don't know. All we do know is on the day of her disappearance, she was supposed to be working until about 6:30 p.m., but around 4:30, so 2 hours before she usually left work, she just took off. Really didn't say anything to anybody, didn't say goodbye, see you tomorrow, hey, I gotta leave. She just took off 2 hours early. Was she prone to doing this? I don't know. But she did it the day that she disappeared. So this is where she was working. And as far as I could tell, this is where she was living at the time, 425 Church Street, and we will come back to that. Kind of going to try to go in order here. So what eventually happens is the next day, her car is found on Windy Ridge Road. I do not have an exact address. It's not a short road, so it could be anywhere in this general area. I'm not sure it matters. My perception, reading what the news says about finding this car, is that the car wasn't hidden. It wasn't damaged in any way. The license plate was still on it. Of course, sometimes when disappearances happen, a perpetrator might take the license plate off the vehicle so it cannot be easily identified. Certainly possible. But that is not what happened with Lindsey's car. Seemingly, it was in an area where it could be easily seen. I don't know if a police officer or a deputy was just driving around and happened upon it. I think the car was found before it was even known that Lindsey was missing. I could be wrong about that. Really hard to tell in reading the news. But it was found fairly quickly, within 24 hours of her leaving her work. Was it on a dead end or somewhere? I don't know. It might have been just right along the road. I don't know. But this is where the car was found. Police start wondering what's going on. Whose car is this? Of course, they can just type it into their computer. It turns out to be Lindsey's. And eventually what happens is they end up at this 425 Church Street address. And what they discover is most of Lindsey's stuff is there. Her purse, her ID, maybe even her phone are all there. In addition, it seems that she left without making proper arrangements for her pets that she had. I think she had more than one. Maybe a combination of dogs and cats. I don't know, but it sounded to me like there was more than one pet that she had. Did not seem like she'd put out extra food or extra water, thinking she was going to be gone for a while. It seemed that the pets were pretty much abandoned. And we have to remember, if she leaving work at 4:30, let's say that she got home around 5:30 or 5 o'clock, and I'll get to the ATM in a second, that by the time the car was found, might have been almost 24 hours that those pets were all by themselves. Possible. Might have been shorter, but still probably a longer time than those pets are used to. Somehow they get into her place. I don't know if they had to barge in or bust in or somebody had a key. They get in. They see all of this. No signs of forced entry. No signs of violence. No signs that Lindsey was interrupted in any way. At least nothing that's been reported publicly. And of course, her family, the police start looking at this. This looks like something that's probably not a lot of good signs here. And then somehow, it's unclear how they did this. Maybe somebody had access to her bank records. Maybe one of her family did, or the police served a warrant on her bank, something like that. It was discovered that at some point, of course, before she went home, because she would have needed her ATM card to access her bank, and I believe her ATM card was found at her house. So sometime before, after leaving her work and then depositing all of her stuff at her place, she had stopped at an ATM somewhere. It's not been reported where. Maybe it was the ATM for her bank, but we also know that, for example, convenience stores have ATMs. Just not sure what the situation was. But she stopped. We don't know, in addition, what time it was. We don't know how much money she took out, which I think would be very helpful to us. But somewhere in this area, she ended up getting money, seemingly went home. The ATM, the video showed her by herself. That doesn't mean that she was. There was no hooded figure behind her with a gun or anything like that, just her by herself. Maybe somebody was waiting in the car. Certainly possible. But they go there, and she is not there. All of her stuff's there. And so they start doing a search. She's not there, not sure what's going on. The information, a month later, you don't need to be a missing persons expert to think, well, this doesn't look good. And so we come back to where her car was found, and news accounts state that the family doesn't think she was ever in this area, Windy Ridge Road. It's about 20 minutes from where she lived, equally about 20 minutes from where she worked. Does seem like people do live out in this area. However, there are some woods here that doesn't look like any woods have been cleared out. It looks like this could be area that would be tough to search. Searches were done. Nothing was found. I'm not totally surprised by that. Oftentimes, searches are not successful, and then years down the road, remains of the missing person are found in that exact area. That happens. Something else to remember, though, regarding this location in the car is that the keys were not in the car. The keys were not found at her home. The keys were found, I guess, in the woods, in the grass, in a ditch around her car somewhere. I don't know how far away. This is fairly rare. For the disappearances that we've covered on Unfound, where a car has been abandoned, it's usually one of two things. Either the keys are never found, or the keys are in the car. Rarely do you find the keys deposited somewhere else in the woods. But that's seemingly what happened with Lindsey's disappearance. Could be that she threw them there, someone else threw them there, she dropped them by accident. Maybe somebody who harmed her dropped them by accident. A lot of different possibilities. But I want you to understand that for keys to be found in the grass, in the woods, anywhere outside of the car, is fairly rare. So, like I said, lots of search has been done. She hasn't been found. And we're not sure even why she went to this ATM, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later in this video. But those are the locations. Unfortunately, I could not find a lot of information about her phone activity, except to know that she was using it not long, or she was using it at work. Just not a lot of news about, did her phone ever ping down in this area? Did it ping anywhere else? When was it shut off? Just could not find that information out there at this point, covering her disappearance about a month after she went missing. So that is the map, and those are the locations, the most important locations right now for the disappearance of Lindsey Schobelock.
And we're back. Before I get into those educational points I brought up earlier in this video, I hope you will consider becoming a member of this channel. Just see that little join button down there? You can click on it. You can see what you get for joining and becoming a member of this channel. I think you'll like what you see there, and it's for the low, low price of $2.99 a month. I think that comes out to, 7 cents a day, 8 cents a day, 9, 10, 11 cents a day. I'm not a math major, but it's not very much. So I hope you will consider joining. Also, patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. You can contribute that way. PayPal.me/Unfound Podcast. And Unfound can be found on Spotify, iTunes. You can go to the website, theunfoundpodcast.com. And we are also on the major social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All right, and if you see me looking off to, my left, maybe your right,
I do not do these Unfound Nows off the top of my head, so I do take notes. So if you see me looking over, that's what I'm doing. Okay, let's start with the first point I made, first educational point, first learning point, and that is what the news doesn't say. Now, what this means is there are, of course, many articles out there about Lindsey's disappearance. I've also been to Web Sleuths, other places, and this is information that I couldn't find that is certainly important to her disappearance in understanding it better. And you're always going to find this in any disappearance that you look at these days. It's a disappearance is going to happen. A media site, a website, a newspaper covers it. A TV station covers it. But still, 2 weeks in, a month in, a few months in, there's still major points that probably the public should know, but it doesn't. So let me point those out to you. And so the next time you look at a news article about a disappearance, you can quickly tell, you know what? This is some information missing here that really should be known, and I'm going to be looking for it. The ATM. She stopped and got money at this ATM. Well, where is it? I'm sure the police know. I'm sure her family knows, and that's fine. But for us, the public, it might be helpful, especially for those people who live in that town. Who knows? Maybe somebody saw something. But when you keep information like that a secret, it's less likely that people are going to come forward. So I would certainly like to know. I think the public should know, where is this ATM? I'm guessing it was at her bank, but we also know that people can go to ATMs at 7-Elevens, for example, just convenience stores in general. That's one particular place. Was it at that type of place, or was it at a bank? That might be helpful. Also, we don't know about the amount. There's a world of difference between if she got $20 out of the bank or $200 out of the bank, which is usually, I think, the limit when it comes to ATM transactions. In our minds, we can just say, well, she went to the ATM. That's very important. But just even knowing the dollar amount that she took out could really narrow down our choices when we start thinking about, well, what exactly happened to Lindsey? In addition, it might be helpful to know, although this might be a little too private, she took that money out. Was there any money left in her account? If she emptied out of her account, then I would say in general that's probably a bad sign. But on the other hand, if she still had a lot of money in there, then that might be a better sign. So knowing where the ATM is and knowing how much money she took out would be helpful. Unfortunately, neither of those items, neither of that information, just nowhere that I could find. I'm not saying it's not known. It's just not known publicly. It might help us. Her phone. She was using it before she left work. What do those records say? You'll notice that I think a coworker of hers said, well, she was on it, and the person wasn't sure. Was she talking on it? Was she texting on it? Was she looking something on social media, Instagram? Did somebody send her a message on Messenger, on Facebook? We just don't know. But what do the records say? I'm sure the police have gotten them. I'm hoping her family also got them to see maybe it was a text. Who was it from, or did she text somebody? This is very, very important information that would be nice to know for the rest of us. And with many unfound disappearances, where this information is still unknown, it leaves everything up in the air. When you don't have what I would call those points that I just brought up, very important pieces of information that the public probably should know but doesn't. This does not allow the public to help as much as it could. And we talk about all sorts of disappearances on Unfound. Of course, Lindsey's is only about a month old, her disappearance. We cover disappearances that are 20 years old, where there's still information that is unknown that you would think should be known.
even if we start getting much closer, maybe 10 years ago, where cell phone information is readily available, people started to, the way I think about it, cell phones really became an everyday thing, an accepted thing kind of around 2005, like when the first iPhone came out. And still, we will cover disappearances from 2010, 2015, where families don't have the cell phone records. That's not good. And it's one of the main points I make to them. You need to get that. I put that at the top of the list. You need to get that. Surely the police have it. You need to have it. So I run into this too much, and it's maybe a little more excusable with recent disappearances because everybody's trying to figure out what do we need to do first, second. But this information is important, and the more you put off getting it, the less likely you're going to get it. Let's move on to point number 2, learning point number 2 for the disappearance of Lindsey Schobelock. We've been here before. Now, what do I mean by that? Chillicothe, Ohio has a reputation. Maybe some of you don't know that, or maybe many of you do know that because there was a documentary that was done that I think played on the FX channel some years ago. It was called The Forgotten Women of Chillicothe. Not the greatest series. I think it was a 6-part series, something like that. Not the greatest series, but I watched it. And Unfound has covered 2 disappearances that people tend to believe are connected to Chillicothe. So that's why I say we've been here before. We at Unfound, we've been there before. Megan Lancaster, she disappeared from Portsmouth, Ohio. For many of you, maybe you remember Mike Moran. Unfortunately, he has died recently, but he's going on trial for He was going to be on trial for a lot of different charges. He now will not be able to stand trial because he's deceased. But many people tried to connect Megan Lancaster's disappearance, which is still unsolved, to the disappearances and murder of women in Chillicothe, Ohio. Another one that we covered that some people have tried to connect to Chillicothe is Jamie Bowen. This even goes further back into Unfound's history. But she was at her sister's, and she was allegedly walking to her mother's in Columbus, and she disappeared. The issue, Jamie had a drug problem, just like Megan did. Both Jamie and Megan had a history of prostitution, much like these women who went missing and who were murdered in Chillicothe. I'm not saying that Lindsey was involved in any of that. But there does seem to be a thing for women to go missing or be murdered in Chillicothe. I'm not sure if Lindsey was aware of that. This is going back several years when the start to this happened. But does her family know? If her family's watching this, they should know that Chillicothe has a reputation. So I just have to ask. I did not see this anywhere, but I have to ask, is it possible that Lindsey was involved in this kind of activity as well? I'm not saying she was. I don't know. I didn't see anything out there to believe that or to know that, to think that. But it's something that should be considered. And what I'm saying is that if she was into that, then maybe Lindsey's disappearance could be connected to all of these other women, because a lot of these disappearances and the murders of these women are still unsolved. Could Lindsey be connected to them somehow? So once again, we've been to Chillicothe. We at Unfound anyway have been there before, and I think a lot of investigators, private investigators, and production crews and everyone else have been to Chillicothe because it does seem to have an unusual number of women there that have gone missing or have been murdered. In fact, just off the top of my head, I think one woman went missing and then just her leg, I think, was found in a creek or something. I don't know. I don't remember if the rest of her had been found, but something is going on there, and I'm not sure what it is. And then number 3, mental health rules almost all. Now, what do I mean by that? According to reports, Lindsey had been struggling. I saw a report that she had gone to the hospital, checked herself in, but the hospital said, not sure what we could do. We're not sure if we can help her or not. I'm guessing that maybe she was on some antidepressants or something, but those don't always work, and they can be very finicky. They can work one day and not work the next. I've never had to take anything like that, but I know enough people who have, and that's what they've told me. And mental health issues, they come up quite a bit on Unfound for just the regular episodes of the podcast that comes out every Friday. In addition, when it comes to depression, we know that it makes people make decisions they normally wouldn't make. Even from day to day, they might not think about doing something. Then the next day when they're down, they will think about doing something, maybe even harmful to herself, himself. This is very real. And so just because Lindsey might have been fine earlier in that day of February 23rd does not mean she was mentally okay at the time she left work early. But we have to be clear about this. There is a difference. Certainly, drug addiction can cause mental health issues. Certainly. And we've talked about it a lot of times on Unfound. What I'm talking about is the traditional idea of mental health. People having problems with their stability that has nothing to do with any addiction or anything. It's just something chemical, something environmental, maybe abuse that occurred earlier in their life, maybe PTSD, something like that. That's what I'm talking about. But I certainly understand that drugs can also cause mental health issues. Now, in this title for part number 3, why do I say mental health rules almost all? Why doesn't it rule all? Well, it rules almost all because outside, usually what we look at first is, was there foul play? There's no signs of it that I see in Lindsey's disappearance at this time. That does not mean that didn't happen. But first, we have to look at, is this a murder or not in any disappearance? That's the first concern. Has somebody done something and gotten away with it? Once we can rule that out, and then we may start thinking about drugs or mental health. But mental health should be at least be in probably slot number 2. Especially now in the 21st century when we have a huge mental health issue in the United States. I continue to say this. Suicides are up. Drug addiction is up. People taking mind-altering drugs, antidepressants, antipsychotic drugs to fix depression or bipolar disorder, issues like that, through the roof. And so that's why it should always be high on our list. But I'm not sure it should necessarily be number 1. I still believe that foul play is still the number 1 cause of disappearances, but mental health could surely be number 2. And we have covered some of those kinds of disappearances on Unfound. A long list. I will just give you a few. Renee LaManna, Keith Fetter, Devin Bond, a young man, Devin Bond, and his was solved, and he had committed suicide. And the reason he had done that is because he liked a girl, and he was not allowed to see her anymore, and he decided to take his own life. But we've covered many, many disappearances where the topic of mental health certainly came up. Maybe that's not what caused the disappearance, but certainly it was going on in that missing person's life to the point where we had to talk about it in the interviews that I do with families. So overall, I have a concern about her going to the ATM. Just overall looking at this, the way I think I understand Lindsey's disappearance. I have a concern about her going to the ATM. The reason being is that we are almost to a cashless society in the United States, and maybe most places. That there isn't anything that you can't buy pretty much with a card.
whether it's an ATM card or a credit card. I know for myself, I don't really carry cash anyway. That's really not how I've ever been, ever. But when I do go to the ATM, it's because I'm getting cash for things that people don't take a credit card or ATM. For example, when I go play disc golf in my club, you have to put your money in. That's cash. All right, they don't have a credit card machine or anything. Sometimes I do pay through PayPal, though. So there's almost no reason for people to go to the ATM these days. Even though people love having that cash. You never know what can happen. But unless you're going to buy something that can only be bought with cash, unfortunately, the first thing that comes to mind are drugs. I'm not saying Lindsey did that, but we have to think why would somebody go to the ATM when a person's card could surely buy anything out there? Or we could start thinking about it this way. Another reason people go and get cash is because they want to go to a regular store, but buy something and there be no track of it. There's no way to trace that she or he or anybody else was anywhere. Because when we go and use our ATM, that's going to leave a record. And if we go missing, maybe if we're planning to go missing, then the police, the family might be able to hack into those bank records somehow and see, oh yeah, Lindsey was last at Walgreens. I'm just making that up. That's just an example. And it very well may be people who are planning to go missing. The reason they get cash is they want to buy something and they don't want anybody to know that they're buying it. This is something that comes to mind. You can't check bank records, no way to track that person. Another point that concerns me is leaving work early without an explanation. This could be a sign of paranoia or mania, just having to get out of someplace right at that moment. Paranoia or mania, once again, two topics, very common on Unfound. I have another question on top of that, though, another point on top of that. What was she going to do the next day? The way I understand it, the way I have read the news, is that she kind of just picked up and left early. She usually left around 6:30. That day she left 4 o'clock, like at least a couple hours early, and never explained anything to anybody. Had she ever done this before? That might be helpful to know. And if she hadn't, then what are we thinking she was going to be doing the next day when she had to go back into work? How was she going to explain herself? Most supervisors, bosses, owners are not going to be too happy for an employee to just take off and leave without asking, without giving a very good explanation. It seems none of that happened with Lindsey at that tattoo parlor. I think that's unfortunately a bad sign. And then on top of everything else, everything being left at home. What it proves is she certainly did not go straight from the tattoo parlor to where her car was found. And my understanding is the car was found in an area that she never went to, didn't have to drive through that area or anything. But what it shows is that she took off, went to this ATM, and then went home, left her stuff there, and then got in her car. Of course, if it was just her, maybe there was foul play. Maybe something happened. She went to get money for something, and she got abducted. The person forced her to drive home. Certainly possible. There are no facts to dispute that. But it's never a good sign when everything a person usually has on him or her, wallet, purse, phone, keys, anything like that. Of course, her keys weren't left there, but you know what I'm talking about. The things we usually carry on us from day to day. All of those items are left at home. That is never a good sign. So that is my analysis for the disappearance of Lindsey Schobelock from Chillicothe, Ohio. I, of course, hope that she is found alive and well as soon as possible. And if Lindsey's family wants to contact me to talk about this further confidentially,
they can surely do so at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. And thanks for watching.